Look, we have to, of course, respect the decision of the High Court. They've made a decision that I think is going to send shockwaves through not just the Australian community, but internationally as well. And I just want to say, Tom, I know there'll be many, I've already spoken to somebody this morning in relation, a victim of child sexual abuse. And for those victims out there, this will be a really hard day for them. This is going to be a really, really horrifying day. It's going to bring up a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And to those people, I know we're all being told to self-quarantine and to keep our distance. If you are alone and you're struggling with this, please know that there are people out there thinking of you. Our hearts are with you, and we know that you're feeling pretty down right now. So, yes, the decision was unanimous by the court. I think it's really interesting. There'll be a lot of unpacking about how this happened. Obviously, the decision that there was not enough evidence to convict is a serious question mark. But I'm really feeling for victims right across the board right now, not just the victim who brought this case against George Pell, but for many, many others in this country who suffered at the hands of disbelief and of cover-up of the church over many decades. For them, we have to wrap our virtual arms around them today and tell them that we love them.
Senator, on to some of the issues for Parliament tomorrow. The JobKeeper plan the government wants to pass. The Greens have had some issues with it while being broadly supportive. Are you going to vote for it?
Look, we are, of course, welcoming of the fact that the government has seen fit to put a wages subsidy on the table. The last time the Parliament sat in that very extraordinary session back in March, we actually moved an amendment for a wage guarantee and a wage subsidy. It was voted down by the government at the time and by the Labor Party. So it's good to kind of see a bit of catch-up being done. But we are concerned at a large number of people who are going to miss out unless it's fixed. And I was really disappointed to see the government yesterday seemingly close the door to deal with the issue, particularly in relation to casuals. We know that over 1 million casuals in this country will miss out because of the way the government is currently saying that this will be structured. I, of course, have responsibility for the areas of arts and entertainment and tourism, and I know a lot of workers in those fields are going to miss out because of the 12-month rule. There is also still issues with sole traders and people who have freelance arrangements who go in and out of contracts with businesses, and to try and ascertain what their kind of average earnings was on the 12 months or 24 months prior is very difficult for people who work in the event and kind of activity space. So it's just not a realistic assessment on people's income.
They won't have to have that assessed, though. I mean, the JobKeeper plan, for example, gives a payment regardless. The Job Seeker one, if you like, or the Centrelink one also has that doubled payment for what it was before. So isn't that a reasonable approach? If it's too hard to pin someone to a direct job, they still get a payment, which is only going to end up after tax being a couple $100 less a fortnight. There's help for both cohorts.
I think in relation to the 1 million casuals across the country, and we've got to think about who these people are. It's people who have been working in local kind of hospitality industry or retail or tourism or in the events and entertainment space, who had a contract for perhaps, let's say, the Easter period, because a lot of this work is seasonal. They may have been with this employer over the last 12 years in particular parts of the year when it was busy, and now they're not able to stay in that job. Those businesses aren't able, unless we fix this problem, to keep those people on board to get through this period. So, 1 million people left out. I don't think that's a good enough approach from the government. $130 billion and 1 million workers are going to be left out. I don't think any workers should be being left behind.
Just wanted to ask you as well, you've been out there talking about or bemoaning local media being shut down, newspapers feeling it with coronavirus. Do you think there could be a need for bailout of media?
Look, I think this is a really serious issue facing media right across the country, and particularly those small and independent publishers and broadcasters who at the moment offering trusted local community news to their communities, and they're struggling to be able to keep up doing that because of the COVID-19 impact that's having, of course, on industries right across the economy. But at a time when Australians desperately need information they can trust, news in their local area, when everybody's being told to self-distance, to stay away from each other, access and hunger for local news is higher than it's ever been. So we need to do something to help these media agencies stay afloat. The government's announced $5 million, and that's just not good enough. At least the minister's acknowledged there's a problem, but it needs to be much more.
When you say local media is the concern, I mean, some of these are owned by bigger companies. What about the two biggest ones in the country? If you look at Nine, Fairfax and News Corp, I mean, if they're having to lay off a lot of people down the track and gut news, and the information needs to get out to people, do they deserve help as well? And obviously, News Corp, owner of Sky News, I'll be up front there.
Well, there was a package for small and independent publishers that was and regional publishers that I think should be that the rest of that money should be spent to help those players, those smaller players who are really struggling, some of which have already had to close their doors. But for the bigger players, we do need to have a conversation with the government about the value of Australian jobs, journalist jobs, and making sure that people have access to news. It is now time, Tom, for the government to get off their hands and take on the big tech companies. Facebook and Google have been laughing all the way to the bank for too long. The government has given them up until the end of this year to strike a deal. That's just not good enough. The minister needs to step up, take on those big tech companies and make sure that they start paying for the content that they use.